So up next, we have with us our very last speakers. We have Ms. Serena Abdullah and Ms. Rosalyn Wee, who will present their exploratory case study on narrative writing. Ms. Serena Abdullah is a lead educational therapist and assistant director of the MOE-aided DAS literacy program, MAP, and is currently overseeing the development and the implementation of the integrated curriculum at the DAS. Her love and passion for teaching has led her to continuously seek new and innovative teaching methods to bring out the potential and self-confidence in her learners. Ms. Rosalyn Wee, who is currently pursuing a Master's of Arts in Applied Linguistics at the National Institute of Education, is an educator with 8 years of experience working with children with dyslexia. As a curriculum specialist in the DES curriculum team, Ms. Rosalyn has designed the advanced writing curriculum for secondary school learners, which was launched in 2016. They will be presenting on whether structured writing instruction and writing checklist aid learners with dyslexia in their narrative writing. Let us now put our hands together for our last speakers.
A very warm and good morning to all of you. Thank you for attending our research sharing on structured writing instruction and writing checklist aid learners with dyslexia in their narrative writing. I am Serena Abdullah, and co-presenting with me is my colleague Rosalyn Wee. Rosalyn and I are senior and lead educational therapists at the DES, as well as members of the DES curriculum team, where we look into developing, enhancing, and evaluating the curriculum to cater to the needs of our students on the program. We have a combined total of 17 years of teaching experience remediating students with dyslexia. Our areas of interest include edu-technology, higher order thinking skills, and writing. Therefore, this research is focused on the latter as part of an ongoing process to develop, evaluate, and enhance the curriculum, as well as to enhance the writing curriculum, but more importantly, to guide and help our students who struggle significantly in their writing. This slide will give you a glimpse of some of the difficulties our students at the DES face in their writing. Firstly, I am not able to write well because of my weak vocabulary and spelling. I am not able to come up with ideas to write about. I find it difficult to organize my ideas in a logical sequence. I am unsure of the tenses to use in my writing. Perhaps some of these difficulties may strike a chord or may resonate with some of you here in the audience, as you may have experienced the struggles and the resistance your students face or display when it comes to writing activities. Therefore, through this research, we hope to make the process of writing less daunting, more manageable and pleasurable for our students. Writing has been identified as an area that has not been extensively researched in the field of dyslexia. However, in recent times, research findings are growing that document the difficulties that learners with dyslexia face in writing. While dyslexia is often associated with reading problems, learners with dyslexia showed almost as many indicators of writing problems as of reading problems when both writing and reading were assessed. Further, Berninger's 2006 research also reported that learners with dyslexia often overcame their reading problems but continue to face significant problem and difficulty in spelling and written composition. Additionally, executive functions have been explored as a contributing factor to dyslexia and a correlation with writing as they influence handwriting and the overall written output. Learners with dyslexia often find it challenging to generate ideas and content to write about based on given topic, either by retrieving the information from memory or from their general pool of knowledge. Moreover, they may also demonstrate limited knowledge about writing genres, conventions, and even devices. For most common forms, including narrative writing and recount. As writing is a rather complex process, Executive functions monitor the stages of planning, drafting, editing, and revising to enable the students to gradually reach the level of competence and confidence in their writing. Therefore, the MAP writing curriculum was developed to cater to the learning needs and challenges of our students, and it comes along with writing packs that have been developed meaningfully to ensure that the writing lessons are structured, cumulative, and sequential, and that they have clear, specific, and purposeful objectives to guide and scaffold our students. As part of an ongoing process to monitor our student progress, the curriculum-based assessments, or CBAs in short, are administered twice a year in terms 2 and 4. The assessment components are closely aligned with the MAP integrated curriculum that are taught to students on the program, including writing. Narrative text writing is focused in this research as it is one of the more common text types exposed and taught to students at an early age. According to Sun and Report 2012, most studies of narrative development have focused on preschool and younger school-age children. Moreover, even in Singapore, the MOE 2010 has highlighted the use of show and tell as an example of an activity to improve oral communication in the English language syllabus for primary and secondary levels. On top of that, Summer, Connelly, and Barnett 2016 described that the narrative writing skills of children with dyslexia was significantly lower than their peers of the same age in these areas: ideas and development, coherence, vocabulary, sentence structure, grammar, and punctuation. Therefore, this research also aims to improve our learners' writing in these areas mentioned. The purpose of our research is to conduct a year-long case study to explore whether the use of structured writing instruction and student writing checklists could lead to an improvement in narrative writing skills of learners with dyslexia. Our research question is how do structured writing instruction and explicit feedback in the form of a writing checklist improve narrative writing skills in learners with dyslexia? And a hypothesis is the structured writing instruction and writing checklists will improve writing skills in learners with dyslexia. And finally, our research aim is to investigate the effectiveness of the structured writing instruction within the DES and whether the use of a student-friendly checklist could lead to an improvement in narrative writing skills of learners with dyslexia. Several instruments were used in this research. They include the one-picture stimulus taken from the curriculum-based assessment, the writing rubric, which is an adaptation of the 6+1 trait writing from Northwest Regional Educational Laboratory 2004, student-friendly checklist that was curated to help raise awareness in students of the traits that make up good writing, structured writing instruction that follows closely the process journal approach by Badger and White 2000, curriculum cycle by Derewianka 1991, and as well as the 6+1 trait writing. There were a total of 4 cycles that took place over a period of 1 year, with each cycle coincided with each school term. Each cycle consists of the writing stages to guide and scaffold the learners on how to write a narrative composition. And these stages include pre-writing, deconstruction, joint construction, as well as independent construction. The research design that was employed was an exploratory case study research where 10 participants from 4 different classes at the DES were identified to take part in this research. They were grouped randomly into 2 groups, namely Experimental Group 1 and Experimental Group 2. The participants were also identified based on convenience sampling because the researchers were also teachers involved in the writing intervention. There were 4 participants in Experimental Group 1 and 6 participants in Experimental Group 2, all within the ages from 10 to 12 years, and they are students from the MOE mainstream primary schools. The timeline for the year-long research is reflected in this slide. A pre-test was administered at the start of term 1 of cycle 1 before the commencement of the writing intervention. As part of monitoring the students' progress, mid-test was administered in term 2 of cycle 2, while the overall post-test was conducted in term 4 of cycle 4. The structured writing instruction was taught to participants from both experimental groups 1 and 2. Participants from experimental group 1 were also exposed and taught how to use a structured writing instruction during the editing phase as a tool to help them or to provide feedback on their writing. On the contrary, participants in experimental group 2 only received verbal feedback on their writing. I'll now hand over the time to my colleague Rosalyn, who will be sharing with all of you the results, findings, and analyses of the progress made by the participants in this research.
Good morning to all my fellow teachers and researchers. I would like to share with you some of our findings. A comparison of performance was done for each participant at the pre, mid, and post-test over a total score of 24 points. As most of my fellow colleagues know, CPA is over 24. The scores from the pre-test were obtained as a baseline to ascertain the participants' writing ability before intervention, while the mid and post-test were used to monitor their progress for the entire year of intervention as part of the API cycle. The API cycle consists of 4 main parts: assessment, planning, intervention, and finally, evaluation. 9 out of 10 participants have benefited from taking part in the structured writing intervention. Most participants have made significant progress, especially during the mid-test, and a slight regression was seen in most participants' scores for the post-test, except for participants C, E, and F. This may be attributed to factors such as a dip in students' motivation after their major exams, such as the primary school leaving exam, PSLE, as well as an increase in the absenteeism rate after their PSLE. Participants C, E, and F, as seen here, who were not in primary 6, took their end-of-year exam at a later date as compared to the PSLE students, and this could be a possible factor for the fact that their results did not show a dip in their post-test. Experimental 1 group participants received both the structured writing instruction as well as the checklist, while experimental 2 group participants received only the structured writing instruction as well as verbal prompts. This figure shows the results for experimental 1 group with the use of a student-friendly checklist. And in this graph, the numbers here are too small for any meaningful analysis to be undertaken, but based on the results collected, most participants in experimental 1 group have made improvement. If you consider participant C, for example, this child has a very low starting score, but made substantial and sustained progress after being taught using a structured writing approach and using the checklist. By contrast, participant B, with one of the highest scores overall, but his performance regressed slightly at mid and post-test, as you can see over here. Nevertheless, 50% of the participants, 2 out of 4, maintained their performance from mid to post-test. This figure shows the results for experimental group 2 without the use of a student-friendly checklist, but only using verbal prompts. Similarly, it may be seen that most of the participants made good and sustained progress, with participants G and H, who were the lowest achievers at pre-test, making the most improvement at mid-test, and participant G maintaining much of that progress at post-test. It may in fact be more difficult to maintain exceptional progress long-term, as one would typically show a regression to its earlier mean performance. In terms of percentage maintenance of progress, 57%, 4 out of 7, of experimental 2 group participants maintained their progress. A rough equivalent figure to experimental 1 group which shows that a structured writing instruction does help students with specific learning differences, like dyslexia, in their writing. Now, the most useful way of considering the impact of the intervention would be to consider results of participants who were initially high and low achievers after pretest. Here we have taken a cutoff of 10 as it seems to divide naturally here. Therefore, high achievers refer to participants who obtained one of the highest scores at pretest. Examples like, if you can remember, A, B, E, and F. While low achievers obtain one of the lowest scores, which are mainly participants C, D, G, H, I, and J, which actually makes up a lot of our students. If we split the groups into those who received high scores and those who received low scores at the beginning, then the structured writing instruction is most useful, with improvement persisting with the lower achieving group. If we consider the means, it may be seen that the higher achievers are basically static, with the highest achiever, participant B, showing some decline in scores over time, but still remain high overall, whereas the lower achievers increase from a mean score of 5 in the pretest to a mean score of 14 in the mid-test, and then continue to demonstrate improvement throughout the period of intervention. For interventions of this type, it's customary to perform an effect size analysis. The effect size is calculated as the amount of improvement divided by the standard deviation of the group. An effect size of 0.2 is seen as small, 0.5 as moderate, 0.8 as or above as large. In our analysis, we compared the improvement of the low achieving participants with the high achieving participants and demonstrate an effect size of 1.5, indicating a high significant impact of the intervention for participants who had low skills initially. Previously, we have looked at the macro level, and at a micro level, we are able to see remarkable increase in scores among the low achievers, such as participant C from the experimental group 1 and participant G from experimental group 2, as reflected in the next two figures. This figure shows the improvement in participant C's writing ability in terms of the different traits over 1 year of intervention. Initially, at the pretest, he only scored a total of 2 marks under ideas for introduction and was not able to meet the requirements for the other traits. Participant C was new to the MET program last year, and this primary 5 student also felt that his the whole writing process was very hard, and he felt that he was not good at writing compositions at all. Before intervention, when he just joined, participant C was not aware of the text structure of a narrative text. His writing did not have a problem, a solution, or a conclusion. His ideas were also irrelevant to the given topic and picture stimulus. Additionally, there was no paragraphing, and his sentences were either incomplete or incoherent. During intervention, he continued to work hard. And after intervention, participant C included a setting, characters, and time in his introduction, although they were not well expanded. He also included a problem in his writing, which was absent in his pretest, if you could remember. Furthermore, there was an attempt at paragraphing which made his essay easier to read. Thus, after going through the structured writing instruction and reminders using the writing checklist, participant C was able to pass most of the traits, even though he still needs help with sentence fluency and conventions that includes grammar, spelling, and punctuation. And overall, participant C has shown small yet steady progress in his writing. This figure shows the comparison of scores for participant G, experimental 2 group. Unlike participant C, participant G was in primary 6 last year and has been attending DAS since he was in primary 4. However, he was still adverse to writing and has very limited knowledge of the writing conventions. Despite not having a checklist, it can be seen that participant G has also made notable progress in his post-test scores when compared against his pre-test scores. Before intervention, participant G was not aware that the narrative writing story includes an introduction, a build-up, a problem, a solution, and a conclusion. There was also an absence in the development of his characters and setting. Furthermore, his sentences were also incoherent and his ideas were not relevant to the given topic. After intervention, participant G is now aware of the text structure of a narrative text. His ideas were also relevant to the story with the setting, characters, and time clearly stated. Although there are still areas to be worked on, such as word choice, participant G has demonstrated small yet commendable improvements after a year of intervention. We will now show you some samples of our data. This is a snapshot of student G during his pre-test. As you can see, there are many issues with his spelling and structure does not fit a narrative text structure. So it goes like, it was a wonderful day. There got many pupils in the butterfly park. There is a man doing yoga. But as you can see, this is a descriptive writing. It is not a narrative piece. Students will then be taught using the writing stages as presented by Serena earlier. This is using a word splash presented on the board. We even use probing questions such as question of the day and brainstorming. Next, the student will be taught the text structure and language features of a narrative text type using an exemplar. We'll be getting them to highlight different important language features in the text. And the teacher can choose to use the Story Mountain graphic organizer to deconstruct the text structure in order to prepare the student for joint and guided construction later on, such as this. Finally, the student will use what has been brainstormed and guided to construct a narrative piece of writing independently on its own. During the research, we felt that we were limited in certain areas. Firstly, the number of participants in order to make meaningful conclusions and recommendations for our program evaluation were very small. Secondly, despite our efforts to achieve inter-rater reliability with 2 researchers not marking their own learners writing scripts, as you well know, we have actually 3 teachers, 3 researchers doing this project. The researchers were also the authors, right? So sometimes it might contribute to bias. There was no prior background reading of the original psychological assessments of the participants to find out what were the original diagnosis of the participants and whether they might have other issues such as speech-language impairments to prevent them from understanding the instructions or learning vocabulary from reading the exemplar. Despite mostly regular attendance in cycles 1 to 3, which corresponded with the primary school terms, the study did not see 100% attendance in cycle 4, which coincided with the major exam. So as we well know, sometimes with students not coming in, sometimes it might interfere with the intervention. Unlike school, they could not have a longer duration for intervention. It was restricted to only 2 hours per week, which is the duration of a normal DES math class. Guidance was given to the learners based on the OG approaches and principles of being diagnostic and prescriptive, which takes into account their literacy needs such as vocabulary and independence level. If the participant needed more help and was dependent on the teacher, more guidance was given. Therefore, this means that no homogeneity in terms of the amount and the type of guidance given to the learners. Lastly, we did not further investigate the cause of the regression from mid to post-test for 70%, 7 out of 10 participants, to find out the real causes of why they have regressed, which we will be touching on for our future research. So now I'll pass the time to Serena, who will share our conclusion and our plans for future research. Thank you.
To conclude, majority of the participants made progress and they were able to maintain their progress over time. The results for this research also presented a clear case for the continuation of the structured writing instruction to teach and guide students in their writing. The addition of the student-friendly checklist can be seen as good practice in areas such as motivation and executive functions, but the current data does not provide sufficient support to indicate that the checklist in itself is effective. For future research, a further enriched intervention is proposed to use 3 picture stimulus to enhance the writing process to firstly align closely to the mainstream exam syllabus, and secondly, to explore whether the students are able to apply and transfer what they have learned to different contexts and situations, thereby further supporting the success of the structured writing instruction. It will also be very interesting to investigate further the reason or reasons for the regression in scores as reflected and shown in the previous slides. Finally, it will also be compelling for us to explore further if there is an increase in students' motivation for those who have been taught writing using the structured writing instruction coupled with the aid of the student-friendly checklist to enable them to monitor their own progress independently. If you would like to read out more about our research, you can find our published journal article in the latest APJDD issue, which I believe all of you should have received in your goodie bag. And before I end the presentation, I would like to just take a few minutes to express our thanks, special thanks to the following colleagues, Emeritus Professor Angela Fawcett for her assistant advice, guidance, and encouragement that she has rendered to us throughout the entire course of research. Geeta Shantaram for her leadership and continued support. Lois for her guidance and advice during the initial phase of our research. And lastly, the curriculum team and colleagues for their dedication and assurance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Serena and Ms. Rosalyn, on your sharing of the evaluation of the intervention program that was implemented and how it has impacted. In fact, it has positively impacted our learners' narrative writing skills. So we have with us Ms. Fanny Fu to present the token of appreciation to our speakers.